That was the word the site director used. Rubble, when she radioed down to the surface crew and asked for a pair of hands to clear the floor around pedestal before the afternoon's documentation session. Someone had to sweep the clay debris away from the base. Someone had to do it without disturbing the relic itself. Someone had to be expendable enough that if they accidentally damaged something, the loss was manageable. They sent me. My name is Darrow Felt. I have worked soil my entire life. First, my father's fields on Collins Ridge, then a decade of contract groundskeeping on the survey stations, then the last 6 years here on Embra IV, keeping the excavation perimeter clear of the creeping dustgrass that tried to reclaim the dig site every wet season. I am not a scholar. I hold no credentials. The closest I have come to academic qualification is being able to identify 17 varieties of soil composition by smell alone, which is a skill that impresses no one at a research station staffed by xenoarchaeologists with terminal degrees. I climbed down the access shaft that morning with a soft brush and a collection pan. The lectern stood at the center of Chamber 12, exactly as it had stood for the 103 years since the first survey team cracked the ceiling open and let daylight in. Pale and smooth, carved from something denser than any stone the geologists had been able to classify. Its surface was the color of old teeth. Rings of glyphs circled its base in tight, precise bands, glyphs that every linguistic team on the planet had photographed, cataloged, and failed to translate, because the glyphs had never once lit up to confirm or deny any proposed reading. The lectern did not respond to touch. That had been established in the first decade. Scholars in haptic gloves, scholars with bone conductor arrays pressed to its surface, scholars who had whispered into the thing for hours. Nothing. A xenobiologist had once spent an entire field season trying to determine whether the material was technically alive. Her conclusion, indeterminate. The relic stood in the silence of something that had chosen long ago to wait. I stepped around the documentation rigs and crouched at the base. The clay debris was thick here, washed in from the ceiling breach over the last season and dried hard in the pale light. I started at the far side, working methodically, the way you learn to work when you've spent years clearing root mass from equipment housings. Soft strokes, patience, letting the brush do the work. I moved clockwise around the base, which put me with my back to the access shaft, and my left hand resting lightly on the lowest ring of the pedestal. Balance. I was not thinking about the relic. I was thinking about the grit under my thumbnail, and about whether the afternoon crew would need the south perimeter cleared before the rains, and about nothing else at all. The warmth started beneath my palm. I noticed it the way you notice a hearthstone on a winter morning. That first moment when you press your hand flat and realize the stone has been holding heat all night. Slow, deep, emanating from the interior rather than the surface. I looked down at my hand and did not move it, because something in the animal part of me understood, before the thinking part did, that moving would be wrong. The lowest ring of glyphs lit. Not a flash, not an alarm. A bloom, the way a coal catches, from one point, and spreading outward around the circumference, each glyph filling with light from the inside out. The color of pale amber, sunlight through a jar of old honey. The ring completed its circuit. The next ring began. Behind me I heard Dr. Vashin make a sound I had never heard a person make before. A short, broken intake of breath that was not quite a word. Then footsteps, fast, and then the footsteps stopping, because she understood on instinct the same thing I had understood. Do not disturb this. I kept my hand flat on the stone. The rings were climbing now. Third, fourth, fifth, each one blooming amber in sequence. The light building, not in intensity but in presence. The way a voice builds when someone stops speaking quietly and begins to speak at their full register. The chamber filled with it, not bright enough to hurt, but thorough enough that I could see every crack in the clay walls, every careful label the documentation team had fixed to the equipment rigs, every face of the 7 researchers who had frozen in a loose half-circle behind me. They were not breathing. Neither was I think. Top ring lit. The full height of the lectern was amber now, the glyphs cycling in slow rotation, each one passing through a brief, brighter pulse as it completed its turn. The surface under my palm had shifted from warm to something closer to alive. A faint vibration, regular as a heartbeat, pressing up through the stone into the bones of my hand. Then the lectern opened. Not dramatically. There was no explosion, no crack of ancient seals giving way. The front face of the pedestal, the side I was not touching, separated along a seam that had been invisible, each half drawing back with the deliberate precision of something that had been waiting to do exactly this, and had decided, finally, that it was ready. Inside was a cavity, deep and dark, lined with the same amber light that the glyphs were still cycling through. Inside the cavity was nothing, no object, no text, no stored artifact. The light in the cavity gathered. It rose from the base of the hollow and took no shape I could name, not a projection, not a hologram, not fire. A coherence of the amber, rising itself into a column that reached the top of the open face and held there, steady and breathing. The lectern spoke, 4 words. Not in any language I recognized, and yet I understood them the way you understand something in a dream. Not translated, not processed, just known, arriving already complete, in the part of you that is older than language. Child of the first soil. The amber held for 3 more seconds. Then it faded, gently, the way the last light fades from a good sunset, not sudden, not dramatic, just the slow and dignified conclusion of something that had done what it came to do. The glyphs dimmed ring by ring, descending in the reverse order they had lit. The front face of the pedestal drew closed along its invisible seam. The warmth under my palm faded last, pulling back into the stone like breath, pulled back into a sleeping chest. The chamber was silent. Took my hand off the surface and straightened up slowly because my knees had been bent a long time, and I was 47 years old, and my knees noticed these things. I turned around. 7 faces, 7 people with advanced degrees in the study of exactly this kind of thing, every one of them looking at me with an expression I did not have a name for then, and still don't entirely have a name for now. It was not envy. It was not fear. It was the look of someone who has spent their entire life walking toward a door that will not open, and has just watched someone walk through it by accident while carrying a dustpan. Dr. Vashin opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Did it? She started. I don't know, I said, which was true, in the way that knowing the name of a thing and knowing the weight of it are 2 different kinds of knowing. I picked up my brush. I picked up my collection pan. I climbed back up the access shaft into the pale daylight of Ember IV, into the smell of wet clay and dust grass and the particular mineral sharpness of soil that has never been turned by anything human. I had spent my whole life working dirt. I had never once thought to ask where the first seeds came from.